She thought she was doing her job. But when a secret boss watches from the shadows, everything changes. Maria Jenkins had spent most of her adult life behind the counter of a small diner in the heart of Boise, Idaho. The Silver Spoon Diner was one of those places that wasn't particularly famous for its food or decor, but it had a charm all its own. To the regulars, it was a home away from home. To the new customers, it was a place where the coffee was always fresh and the service was always warm. And to Maria, it was where she felt truly alive. At 32, Maria had seen her fair share of ups and downs. She wasn't rich and she wasn't poor, but she worked hard, maybe harder than most. The diner was her world. It wasn't just about serving food to people. It was about creating connections, offering a smile when someone needed it, and being the one person in someone's day who made them feel seen. It wasn't glamorous, but it was fulfilling. Maria had grown up in a small town just outside of Boise, raised by her single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. It had always been just the 2 of them, and they'd learned to rely on each other. Her mother had instilled a deep sense of responsibility in her, teaching Maria that kindness and hard work were the most important things you could offer anyone. That's what Maria carried with her every day, as she poured coffee for the older gentlemen who came in every morning at 6 a.m., as she joked with the college students who sat at the corner booth for hours, nursing their cups of tea, and as she comforted the lonely souls who came in just for the company. But what Maria never expected was the way one small, seemingly insignificant interaction would change the course of her life forever. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon when he walked in. A man in his late 40s, dressed in a plain navy blue jacket, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He didn't look like someone who was there for a power lunch or a business deal. No, he looked like someone who just wanted a break from the world. Maria couldn't place it, but something about him made her feel like she should treat him differently than the usual crowd. "Hi there. Welcome to Silver Spoon," she greeted with her trademark smile, ready to take his order. He nodded and took a seat at the far corner booth. "Thanks," he said, his voice low but warm, like someone who wasn't interested in making a fuss. Maria picked up a menu and walked over, setting it down in front of him with a smile. "What can I get you today?" she asked, trying to make small talk, something she did with everyone. She loved learning about people, hearing their stories, their lives, their struggles. It was what made every day feel unique. The man looked up at her, giving a small, appreciative smile. "I'll just have the soup of the day, if you don't mind. And a coffee. Black. Coming right up," she said, jotting down the order. She could tell right away that he wasn't someone who needed extra attention. He was quiet, not one to draw attention to himself. But he had an aura of calm about him. As she walked back to the counter to place the order, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something about this man that seemed familiar. Maybe it was his eyes, the way they seemed to hold stories that no one else would ever know. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, as if he was used to observing more than being seen. But whatever it was, Maria felt like she needed to give him the best service possible, even if he didn't ask for it. She poured the coffee into a mug, the steam rising in gentle curls, and returned to his booth with the food. As she placed the bowl of soup in front of him, she noticed the way he nodded his thanks, genuinely grateful, as if he appreciated the smallest things in life. They exchanged a few more words, casual at first, before the conversation took an unexpected turn. "So, what's your name?" he asked, his voice light, almost like an invitation to talk. "Maria," she said, sitting down across from him without thinking. "And you?" The man paused, taking a sip of his coffee. "Call me Nathaniel," he said after a moment. She smiled, thinking nothing of it. "Nice to meet you, Nathaniel." For the next half hour, they talked. It was the sort of easy, casual conversation you might have with a stranger at a coffee shop, but something about it felt different. Nathaniel shared stories about his travels, his life before he came to Boise, and the kind of work he did. It was interesting, but more than anything, it was the way he listened that struck Maria. He wasn't just making small talk. He was truly listening to her, asking thoughtful questions, showing interest in her answers. And for Maria, who spent most of her days listening to everyone else's stories, it felt like a small but significant gift. She didn't know it then, but that conversation, and her kindness in treating Nathaniel like anyone else was about to have a profound impact on her life. But what Maria didn't realize was that Nathaniel wasn't just any customer. The clock on the wall ticked steadily as the conversation between Maria and Nathaniel continued. It was easy, effortless, the kind of chat that made the hours seem to slip by unnoticed. They talked about their favorite books, movies, and even their childhood memories. Maria found herself laughing more than she expected, and Nathaniel's dry wit and subtle humor put her at ease. But as the minutes passed, Maria felt a sense of familiarity about him, an odd connection that she couldn't quite place. There was something in his eyes, something that seemed to carry years of experience and wisdom, mixed with a level of kindness that was rare to find in the world. He wasn't flashy or arrogant. He was down to earth, like someone who preferred to observe life from the sidelines rather than be in the spotlight. He made her feel comfortable, not like a customer, but like an old friend. Maria refilled his coffee cup for the third time, and he smiled up at her. "You're one of the good ones. You know that," he said, his voice warm, sincere. "It's rare to find someone who truly cares about making their customers feel at home." Maria shrugged modestly. "It's just what I do. Makes the day go by faster when you enjoy the people you're serving." She had been working at the diner for nearly 5 years now, and she had learned that the key to surviving was not just getting through the day, but connecting with the people around you. She loved hearing their stories, listening to their dreams, their struggles, and offering them a little piece of comfort. It was her way of adding meaning to her work. Nathaniel leaned back in his booth, his gaze thoughtful as he stared out the window for a moment. When he spoke again, there was a slight edge to his voice, something that hinted at a depth of experience he wasn't fully sharing. "You know, not many people appreciate the small things, but you—" He paused, meeting her gaze again. "You understand it." Maria wasn't sure what he meant, but she smiled anyway. "It's the little things that count, right?" Nathaniel nodded slowly, almost as if he were weighing something in his mind. "Exactly," he murmured. "Exactly." The conversation shifted again, and they continued to talk about nothing and everything at once. As Maria cleaned up the table, she couldn't help but feel like something was different about this encounter. It wasn't just another ordinary day at work. She found herself genuinely invested in this man's words, in the quiet way he carried himself, and in the way he made her feel like more than just a waitress. But as the clock struck 3:30 p.m., the diner began to quiet down. Nathaniel finished his coffee, stood up, and grabbed his jacket. He gave Maria a friendly smile before pulling out a crisp bill from his wallet. "Thanks for the company, Maria. It's been a pleasure. I'll be back next week." "Anytime, Nathaniel," she replied with a grin, though she was already looking forward to his return. As he walked toward the door, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this man. Perhaps it was the way he'd spoken about the little things that mattered, or the way his eyes lingered on her when he said she understood. She thought about the people who came in and out of the diner every day, regulars, tourists, businessmen. Most of them left without a second glance, their lives moving on. And Maria was just a face in the crowd. But not Nathaniel. He had been different. The bell above the door jingled as he left, and Maria returned to the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. She glanced at the clock and began to prepare for the next round of customers. The day was almost over, but there was a quiet satisfaction in her heart that hadn't been there before. Nathaniel had left an impression on her, one she couldn't quite explain. And somehow she knew she'd be seeing him again. But what Maria didn't know was that Nathaniel wasn't just another customer. He wasn't even who he seemed to be. The next few days at the Silver Spoon seemed to drag on in a haze. Maria couldn't stop thinking about Nathaniel. Something about their conversation stayed with her. Something more than just his words. It wasn't often that a customer left such an impression, and it wasn't like Maria to obsess over a fleeting encounter. But there was a quiet, almost magnetic pull that she couldn't shake. So when, just 3 days later, Nathaniel walked through the door again, she found herself unexpectedly excited. She smiled as he sat at the same corner booth, taking off his jacket and setting it beside him. "Back so soon?" Maria asked, walking over with the menu in hand. "Couldn't stay away," he said with a grin, his eyes twinkling as he looked up at her. "I've been thinking about that soup." Maria laughed. "It's a popular one. I'll bring it right over." As she placed his order, they exchanged a few more casual words, and once again, the conversation flowed effortlessly. They spoke about the weather, the latest news in town, and the best spots to grab a coffee outside of Boise. It was easy, it was comfortable. But this time, Maria noticed something else, a subtle shift in their dynamic. She didn't know how to explain it, but Nathaniel seemed to be paying even closer attention to her, as if he were studying her reactions. It was flattering in a way, but also a little unsettling. "Maria," he said, leaning forward slightly, his voice softer than before. "I've been meaning to tell you, you have a gift, the way you make people feel at home. It's rare." Maria flushed at the compliment, looking down at her hands. "Thank you. I try to make the diner feel like a place people can relax. It's not much, but it's something. Don't sell yourself short," Nathaniel replied with a quiet chuckle. "It's the little things that matter, and you get that." Maria smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She'd always been one to take pride in her work, but hearing it from Nathaniel, someone who seemed to truly understand, made it feel like her efforts were worth something more. But the kindness didn't stop there. As Nathaniel finished his soup and stood up to leave, he pulled out his wallet, the same crisp bill he had left the last time. He hesitated for a moment, then slid an envelope across the table. Maria looked at it, puzzled. "What's this?" "It's for you," Nathaniel said, his tone serious now. "I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but I feel like I should do something for you. You deserve it." Maria opened the envelope, finding a check inside, a sizable one, much more than she would have expected for a casual customer. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't know what to say. She felt both grateful and uncomfortable at the same time. "Nathaniel, She started, but he interrupted her. "Just take it," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You've earned it." She glanced at the check again, and the enormity of the gesture sank in. "I don't know what to say." "There's nothing to say," Nathaniel said with a smile. "Just keep doing what you do. You have a gift, Maria. Don't let it go to waste." With that, he left, and Maria stood there holding the check, her mind reeling. She felt a strange mix of emotions. Gratitude, yes, but also confusion. She had never been one to accept handouts, especially not from someone she barely knew, and yet something told her that Nathaniel's gesture was genuine. But as she walked to the back of the diner and tucked the check into her purse, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. She had been raised to be cautious, to question things that seemed too good to be true. And Nathaniel, he was beginning to seem like just that, too good to be true. That evening, just as Maria was about to clock out, the diner's manager, Roberta, called her into the office. The look on Roberta's face was anything but friendly. "Maria, I need to talk to you," Roberta said, her tone sharp. "Come in and sit down." Maria hesitated, her stomach tightening. Roberta was usually pleasant, but there was something in the air tonight that didn't sit right. She sat down, folding her hands nervously in her lap. "I've received some complaints," Roberta continued, not wasting any time. "And I'm afraid I have to let you go." Maria's heart dropped. "What? What complaints?" "The thing is," Roberta said, glancing at her notes, "we've had a few customers mention that you've been too friendly, too familiar. One of them said you were even disrespectful by sitting down with them." She paused for a moment, clearly uncomfortable. "And another complaint. Well, it involves the envelope you received. It seems like you've been accepting tips that go beyond the usual." Maria's mind raced. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "But I was just being kind. I wasn't doing anything wrong." "I know you," Roberta said, her voice softer now. "You've always been a hard worker, but we can't afford to have anyone making customers uncomfortable. You understand, right?" Maria shook her head in disbelief. "I don't understand. I've always tried to make this place feel like home. Sometimes kindness can be misinterpreted," Roberta said with a sigh. "I'm sorry, Maria, but I have to let you go." Maria stood there stunned, the weight of the words crushing her. She had been fired. Fired for being kind, for trying to make someone feel welcome. But what hurt the most was the confusion, the fact that she had no idea where things had gone wrong, and then it hit her. The man in the corner booth wasn't just any customer. Maria walked out of the office in a daze, her mind struggling to make sense of what had just happened. It was all too much, too sudden, too strange. She had never been fired before. In fact, she'd always prided herself on doing her job well, going the extra mile for customers, making sure they left with a smile. But now, standing in the quiet diner, it felt like the world had flipped upside down. As she grabbed her bag and coat, her mind replayed the last few days, the conversations with Nathaniel, the unexpected generosity, and the warmth in his voice when he told her she had a gift. He had seemed so genuine, so kind. But now, she wondered, had she misread everything? Was the compliment just a way to manipulate her into accepting more than she should have? She shook her head, trying to push away the doubt. No, that didn't make sense. Nathaniel had been kind, hadn't he? He hadn't seemed like the type to play games or manipulate people. But then, why would he leave her in this position? Why would he let her go from a job she loved with no explanation, no warning? Maria felt her stomach tighten as she stepped out into the cool evening air. She hadn't seen Nathaniel since that afternoon, and now all she wanted was an explanation. She didn't even know where to start looking for him, but she couldn't let this go. Something wasn't adding up. As she made her way home, her thoughts swirled like a whirlwind. She tried to make sense of everything, running through every detail in her mind. She'd been fired for being too friendly, for making customers uncomfortable, but that wasn't Maria. She didn't push herself onto people. She never overstepped. She just treated people the way she wanted to be treated, respectfully, with kindness, and with dignity. Could this all really be about that envelope? The check Nathaniel had given her? The more she thought about it, the more her stomach churned. Maybe she had misread the situation. Maybe Nathaniel had been trying to do something nice, but it had backfired. Maybe he had expected something in return, something she hadn't given. Was that why she was being punished? The next day, Maria walked into the diner as usual, still unsure of what to do next. She couldn't bring herself to stay at home, feeling too unsettled and lost. She walked past the entrance, and there, standing near the counter, was Nathaniel. Maria's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to see him so soon, especially after everything that had happened. Nathaniel was standing by the coffee machine, casually waiting for his cup, dressed in the same simple navy jacket he had worn before. He didn't seem to notice her at first, but when he did, his expression shifted. "Maria," he said, his voice carrying a sense of hesitation. "Can we talk?" Her pulse quickened. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this conversation, but she couldn't walk away. She nodded, slowly walking toward him. "What's going on, Nathaniel?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" He seemed to hesitate, looking down at the coffee cup in his hand before meeting her eyes. "I'm sorry, Maria. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I wasn't sure how to handle it." Maria crossed her arms over her chest, a mix of frustration and confusion building inside her. "Handle what exactly?" Nathaniel let out a sigh. "The truth is, I'm the owner of this diner. I've been coming in here under a disguise because I wanted to see how things were really running. I didn't want anyone to treat me differently because I owned the place. I wanted to see things as a customer would." Maria's heart dropped. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. This whole time, Nathaniel had been her boss, the very person who had decided her fate. She felt betrayed. How could he do this to her? How could he watch her, be kind to her, and not once reveal who he really was? "I never wanted to put you in this position," Nathaniel continued, his voice low, sincere. "I've been watching you for a while. You're the best waitress I have, Maria. And I thought I could help you. I thought I could reward you for everything you've done for this place. But when I gave you that check, I didn't realize how it would be perceived. I didn't think it would cause such a stir. And then when the complaints came in, I panicked. I thought maybe you were crossing boundaries." Maria felt a mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion, but also something else, a sense of pity perhaps for Nathaniel. He had been hiding behind a mask, pretending to be someone else. He hadn't trusted her enough to be real. "Do you understand how this feels?" Maria asked, her voice trembling with a mix of hurt and frustration. "You watched me, you heard me, and then you just fired me without telling me who you were, without any explanation." How am I supposed to trust that you really saw me for who I am? Nathaniel opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. For a moment there was silence between them. And then, with a quiet, genuine tone, he said, "I'm sorry, Maria. I should have been honest with you from the start. I've made a huge mistake. But could an apology be enough to undo the damage?" Nathaniel's apology hung in the air between them, heavy with sincerity and regret. Maria stood there, arms still crossed, her heart pounding in her chest. The words he had spoken, the words that revealed his true identity, still felt surreal. She had served him, treated him like any other customer, and now he was standing here, admitting that he was the very person who had fired her. It was almost too much to process. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Nathaniel repeated, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. "Maria, I was trying to get a sense of how things were running here, how you treated the customers. And honestly, I saw how you went above and beyond for everyone. I saw how you care. And I thought maybe I could help you. I thought maybe you deserved more than what this place could offer." Maria shook her head, the confusion still clouding her thoughts. "You watched me. You watched me do my job like I was some kind of experiment." Nathaniel looked down, unable to meet her eyes for a moment. "Yes, and I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if I could reward you, if I could make you feel appreciated, without you knowing who I was, it would make the gesture more genuine. But I was wrong." Maria was silent for a moment, trying to absorb the weight of his words. She had always believed that actions spoke louder than words, that you could tell a lot about a person by how they treated others. She had been kind to Nathaniel, had treated him with the same respect she gave every other customer. And yet, in return, he had watched her, judged her, and then fired her without ever giving her the chance to explain herself. "I don't get it," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "You had the chance to be up front with me. You could have come in and talked to me like a regular customer, like a regular person. But instead you made me feel like I was some kind of test subject. And now I'm supposed to believe that everything you did was for my benefit." Nathaniel's face darkened with shame. "I understand why you're angry. I've been a coward, Maria. I thought by hiding who I was, I could avoid any favoritism. I thought it would be more honest. But I see now that I was wrong." Maria looked at him, her anger slowly giving way to a quiet sadness. She had been wronged, that much was clear. But something about Nathaniel's expression made her feel the weight of his regret. He wasn't just apologizing because he had to. He was apologizing because he had realized the mistake he had made. "You didn't even give me the chance to explain," Maria said, her voice tinged with the exhaustion that had settled in her chest. "I could have told you that I wasn't trying to cross any lines, that I just wanted to do my job. But you didn't let me. You just fired me. Based on assumptions." Nathaniel took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers once again. "I know, and I'm sorry for that. I should have listened to you. I should have seen the way you care for your customers. And maybe, just maybe, I would have seen the kind of person you really are. I should have trusted you." Maria felt a small spark of something like hope, or maybe just relief. It wasn't that she wanted to forgive him immediately, but she could see the genuine remorse in his eyes. She had always believed in second chances, and part of her wanted to believe that Nathaniel deserved one too. Maybe he had learned his lesson the hard way. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for things to be different. "So what now?" Maria asked, her voice quieter than before. "You can't just undo what's happened. You can't just fix it with a few words." Nathaniel nodded, his face full of determination. "No, I can't, but I want to make things right. I've already spoken to Roberta. I'm going to offer you your job back. I'll make sure it's clear that you're the kind of employee this place needs, someone who cares, someone who brings something special to the table." Maria raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "You really think she's going to let me come back just like that?" "I'll make sure she does," Nathaniel said with conviction. "I owe you that much, and I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." Maria took a step back, her mind spinning with the possibility. Could she really go back to the Silver Spoon? Could she work for the man who had watched her without her knowing, who had fired her without a second thought? The pain of the betrayal was still fresh. But there was something in Nathaniel's tone that made her believe he meant what he was saying. It wasn't just an apology. It was a promise. Maybe, Maria said slowly. But I need to think about it. I don't want to just rush back into something without knowing I can trust it again. Nathaniel nodded, understanding. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, and I'll do whatever it takes to show you that I've changed. Maria didn't respond right away. She simply stood there looking at him, weighing the situation in her mind. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since being fired, she felt like there might be a way forward. But could she truly trust Nathaniel again? Or would this be another mistake in a long line of misjudgments? The next few days were a whirlwind for Maria. After her conversation with Nathaniel, a strange mix of hope and hesitation lingered in her thoughts. She spent hours thinking over everything, the job, her firing, the way Nathaniel had approached her. The promise of a second chance was tempting, but the doubt still gnawed at her. Could she really go back to a place that had betrayed her? Could she trust Nathaniel again, after all that had happened? By the time she walked back into the Silver Spoon that Monday morning, her emotions were still in turmoil. The familiar bell above the door jingled as she stepped inside, and she paused for a moment, taking in the quiet, calm atmosphere of the diner. Everything looked the same, but somehow it felt different. She wasn't sure if it was because of the events of the past few days or because of the uncertainty she carried with her now. Roberta, the manager, was standing behind the counter, her eyes widening as Maria walked in. There was a brief moment of silence before Roberta spoke. "You're back," she said, her voice a little hesitant. Maria nodded, but the words didn't come easily. "I'm back, but only on one condition. I'm not here to be treated like I'm invisible. I want to be respected. Not just as an employee, but as someone who genuinely cares about this place." Roberta raised her eyebrows but didn't argue. "Nathaniel already spoke to me. He made it clear that he wants you back. And I suppose I don't have a choice in the matter now." She paused, her tone softening. "I know I wasn't fair to you, Maria. I'm sorry for what happened. I should have given you a chance to explain." Maria glanced over at the door, where Nathaniel stood, watching from the outside through the glass. His face was expressionless, but there was something in his eyes. A quiet plea for forgiveness, an acknowledgement of the mistake he had made. For a moment, Maria hesitated, then nodded. "I'll give it a try," she said, her voice steady. "But I won't forget how things went down. If I'm coming back, it's because I believe this place can do better." "We can do better." Nathaniel stepped in just then, a look of relief passing over his face as he approached Maria. "I'm glad you're back, Maria." "I really am," he said quietly. "And I know I've got a lot to prove, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Maria didn't say anything right away. Instead, she simply looked at him. Really looked at him. It wasn't just about the apology. It was about trust. And about the kind of person he was willing to show himself to be. She had been burned before, but something in her heart told her that Nathaniel wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. The next few weeks were a slow but steady rebuilding process. Nathaniel worked hard to prove he was a man of his word, gradually taking steps to ensure Maria felt valued in a way she hadn't before. He spoke openly with the staff, telling them that Maria was the heart of the Silver Spoon, and that they all had a part to play in maintaining the warmth and respect she had brought to the place. It wasn't perfect, but the diner began to feel like it was on the path to being better, more honest, more respectful, and more welcoming to everyone who walked through its doors. Maria, for her part, worked just as hard as ever. She knew that her job was more than just serving food. It was about fostering connections, creating a space where people felt heard and valued. And as she worked side by side with Nathaniel, she saw a different side of him. A man who was genuinely trying to make amends for his past mistakes. She still wasn't sure if she could fully trust him yet, but she was willing to give him the chance to prove it. It wasn't until one chilly evening, weeks later, that Maria realized just how much had changed. As the diner was winding down, with only a few customers lingering over their coffee, Nathaniel walked up to her at the counter. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, watching her. Finally, he spoke. "I just want to say," he began, his voice calm and steady, "that I see you, Maria. I see everything you do for this place. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the owner. I'm saying it because it's true." Maria looked up at him, her heart a little lighter. She smiled, not out of obligation, but because she felt like the trust they had been rebuilding was finally starting to take root. "That means more than you know," she said softly. And in that moment, something clicked. She didn't need to forgive him right away. She didn't need to forget what had happened. But the journey they had both been on, one full of missteps and learning, had brought them to a place of understanding. And that was enough. Maria knew that life was never perfect, and people made mistakes. But the lesson was clear. Kindness and honesty, when shared freely, had the power to heal. Sometimes, all it takes is a willingness to be real, to make things right, and to take a chance on someone else, and on yourself. As she walked out of the diner that night, the door jingling behind her, Maria felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. The world was full of uncertainties, but for the first time in a while, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. And as for Nathaniel, he had learned the hardest lesson of all, that you can't build a foundation on assumptions, only on truth.